Stonehenge rises from the open chalklands of Salisbury Plain like a piece of engineered geology, massive stones arranged with a precision that still feels intentional even after thousands of winters. It sits in Wiltshire in southern England, about 2 hours by road from London, and it's both smaller and more commanding than many first-time visitors expect. You can't stroll among the stones anymore, but even from the designated path, the monument has a remarkable presence. A ring of upright sarcens capped by lintels, a tighter inner arrangement of smaller bluestones, and a sense that the whole structure is oriented toward something larger than itself. Sky, season, and ceremony. To understand Stonehenge, it helps to picture it not as a single building project, but as a place repeatedly remade. The earliest phase begins around 3000 BCE, long before the iconic stone circle appeared. At that time, the site was an earthwork, a circular ditch with an internal bank, cut into the chalk. Within or near this enclosure were pits known as the Aubrey Holes, named after the 17th century antiquarian John Aubrey who identified them. These pits are strongly associated with cremation burials, making Stonehenge, in its earliest life, part sacred cemetery. This is an important corrective to the popular image of Stonehenge as purely an astronomical instrument. It was also a place of the dead, and likely a place where communities gathered to mark identity, ancestry, and belonging. The stones arrive later in stages that stretch across many centuries. The famous giant blocks are sarcens, hard sandstone boulders that likely came from the Marlborough Downs, roughly 20 to 30 kilometers to the north. Each can weigh 20 to 30 tons, and the largest uprights approach 40 tons. The smaller blue stones, despite the name, are a mix of rock types that can appear bluish when freshly broken. Many originated in the Preseli Hills of West Wales, around 200 kilometers away. That distance matters. Moving multi-ton stones across prehistoric landscapes required planning, labor, and social motivation on a scale that suggests Stonehenge was not a casual local shrine. It was a project that drew people, skills, and perhaps rival groups into a shared undertaking. The engineering is not crude. The sarsen circle and the central horseshoe of trilithons, pairs of uprights topped with a lintel, use carpentry-style joints, mortise and tenon connections to lock lintels onto uprights, and tongue and groove joints between lintels to stabilize the ring. These are stone solutions to problems familiar to woodworkers, implying that the builders had long experience with timber monuments and translated that knowledge into megalithic form. When you look closely at the tops of the uprights, you can still see the rounded tenons that once held the lintels firmly in place. Even in their weathered state, the stones retain the logic of a design structure. Then there's the sky. Stonehenge is aligned so that, at the summer solstice, the sun rises in the direction of the heel stone, a lone megalith set outside the main circle. At the winter solstice, the sun sets in the opposite direction, aligned with the monument's central axis. These alignments don't require modern precision to be meaningful. In a farming society, the turning points of the year are practical markers, but they're also powerful symbols, moments when light and darkness pivot. Many archaeologists now emphasize the winter solstice as especially significant at Stonehenge. Midwinter gatherings would have been a time for feasting, renewing bonds, and reaffirming the order of the world when days were shortest. Yet Stonehenge doesn't stand alone, and the wider landscape is where the story becomes richly three-dimensional. The monument sits within a complex of prehistoric sites that includes burial mounds, processional avenues, timber circles, and large settlements. A key feature is the avenue, a ceremonial pathway lined by banks and ditches that links Stonehenge toward the River Avon. This connection to water is echoed elsewhere in the region. At Durrington Walls, about 3 kilometers away, archaeologists have found evidence of a substantial Neolithic settlement. Houses, animal bones, pottery, and signs of large-scale feasting. Durrington Walls also includes timber circles, leading to a compelling interpretation. Timber structures associated with the living, stone structures with the dead, linked by the river as a route of transition. It's not a settled certainty, but it fits the evidence and gives visitors a way to imagine Stonehenge as part of a ceremonial geography rather than a lonely ring in a field. The human stories embedded here are intimate as well as grand. Modern scientific work has examined cremated remains from the site and isotopic signatures in teeth and bone from the broader landscape, suggesting that some individuals connected to Stonehenge came from far beyond Wessex, possibly even from Western Britain. That mobility hints at pilgrimage, marriage networks, seasonal gatherings, or the movement of skilled workers. It also reminds you that prehistoric doesn't mean static. People traveled, traded, and carried ideas across long distances. Stonehenge's later history is a second life layered on top of its ancient one. Medieval writers treated it as a wonder and a mystery. Early modern antiquarians measured and sketched it with growing seriousness. In the 18th and 19th centuries, it became a symbol that artists, poets, and national storytellers could project onto. The notion that Druids built Stonehenge is one of the most persistent myths. Druids were real religious specialists in Iron Age Celtic societies, but Stonehenge was already ancient by the time Druids appear in the historical record, separated by well over a millennium. The Druid connection took hold largely through later Romantic imagination. Though modern Druid groups and other spiritual communities still gather respectfully at solstices today, adding a contemporary layer to the site's cultural life. If you're planning a visit, timing and expectations matter. Stonehenge is managed by English Heritage, and the visitor route keeps you at a respectful distance from the stones to protect the monument and the ground around it. That distance can surprise people who imagined walking right up to the trilithons, but it also encourages you to read the whole composition, the ring's geometry, the way the stones frame the horizon, and the subtle rise and fall of the land. There are special access visits, typically outside normal opening hours, that allow small groups to enter the stone circle. These are limited and must be booked in advance, but for many visitors, they are the closest experience to the monument's original spatial impact. Arrive early or later in the day if you can. Midday crowds can thin the atmosphere, while morning and evening light brings out the stone's textures and the chalkland's gentle contours. The weather on Salisbury Plain changes quickly. Wind is common, and even in summer it can feel sharp in the open. Bring layers and good walking shoes. The site includes a visitor center with exhibits that help translate the archaeology into human terms, tools, reconstructions, and context for the wider landscape. If you have time, pair Stonehenge with nearby Avebury, another great stone circle complex where you can walk among the stones and through a living village built around them. Together, they show two different ways prehistoric monumentality survives into the present. A few details on the stones themselves reward close attention. Sarsen surfaces often show a kind of pitted weathering, while some bluestones have smoother faces. Several stones bear ancient tool marks and evidence of shaping. The lintels, though massive, were carefully curved to form a continuous ring, an aesthetic choice as much as a structural one. This is not random placement. It's design, executed with patience. And then there are the absences, stones that fell long ago, gaps where uprights once stood, hints of rearrangements as the monument evolved. Stonehenge is partly a ruin, and that incompleteness is part of its honesty. It shows time at work. Stonehenge's most enduring fascination comes from the balance it strikes between clarity and mystery. We can date its phases with radiocarbon methods, source some of its stones geologically, and map the surrounding ceremonial landscape in great detail. We can say with confidence that it was built over many generations, that it served ritual and funerary purposes, that it was aligned with key solar events, and that it belonged to a broader network of monuments and gatherings across Neolithic and early Bronze Age Britain. But the precise meanings, the stories told there, the names of the builders, The emotions attached to midwinter fires or summer dawns remain out of reach. That gap isn't a failure of knowledge. It's the natural boundary between material evidence and lived experience. Standing on that chalk plane, you feel both sides at once. The hard facts of engineering and geology, and the softer human pull of a place that drew people together for reasons strong enough to move stones across a country. Stonehenge endures not because it hides a single secret, but because it concentrates so many realities into one circle. Death and community, landscape and sky, craft and belief. And it still invites visitors to look carefully, ask better questions, and leave with the sense that the past is not a distant country so much as a continuing presence under our feet and above our heads.